Hey guys, and welcome to a new video with me. Am I wearing makeup and pajamas? Yes. Do I care? No. It's quarantine times. Who cares what I'm wearing? Not me. So a couple weeks ago, Gretchen and I did a live show where we talked about how we were both conflicted working in fields, book fields, where we're interacting with kids, sharing Harry Potter, because we are pro-trans people and we don't really want to have people purchasing content that's made by somebody who's actively harming people. I figured that today I would make a video where I talk about some of the books that I recommend outside of Harry Potter. Obviously, if somebody wants to buy Harry Potter, I'm not going to discourage them from buying it. I still have my Harry Potter books, clearly, but I definitely don't recommend them to people as I used to. Like, I used to be like, oh, has your kid read Harry Potter? Here's a copy, take it. Now I'm more likely to go with these other authors instead. I have done my best to research all of these authors and make sure that there's no problematic content that they have put out, or problematic stances, or things that I personally disagree with, in that sort of way. And as far as I could find, none of the authors on this list have done anything weird. That isn't to say going forward they might not do something that might cause me to retract that, but as it stands, these are the authors in the series that I recommend to kids instead of Harry Potter that you might want to check out if you also don't want to support J.K. Rowling. So here we go. Let's go. We are going to start with my favorite book from childhood. This is The Merchant of Death, the first book in the Pendragon series. This was my favorite series growing up. I was reading Harry Potter as it was coming out. Obviously, this was coming out concurrently with Harry Potter. I liked this one better. While Harry Potter is more of a fantasy book, this one is more science fiction. Bobby Pendragon is a young boy who one day his uncle shows up and says, hey, I need your help. He takes Bobby to a New York subway where they climb down into the tracks of the subway, go into this weird room, and then travel to an alternate dimension. Meanwhile, his best friend Mark is back home and realizes that Bobby's house has disappeared, his parents have disappeared, and everybody that knew Bobby or Bobby's parents seems to just have forgotten that he existed. Like, it's like, poof, he's gone. So that's an interesting aspect of it. It's a 10-book series, so if your kid really enjoys it, there's plenty of it in there. Yes, there are dedicated videos to this. We actually did a book club with Casey and Gretchen where we all read all 10 of these back when we were in college and reviewed each of them. Certain ones held up better than other ones, but overall the series was still really strong and really good, and I do still recommend it to folks. DJ Michaela is also somebody who wrote for television and other series, other books, so if they really like this author, they can find more out there as well. The next book on this list is one that I haven't read myself, but I happen to know. This is Percy Jackson, The Lightning Thief, the first book in the Percy Jackson series. I happen to know that there are trans characters, there are gay characters, there are bi characters, there's a lot of things in this world that is representative for kids. As far as the story goes themselves, there are a bunch of kids that are demigods or the children of Greek gods, and it's about them doing stuff together. They go to camp together, so if you like summer camp stories, or if your kid is interested in Greek gods, Greek mythology. If you really like these, there's obviously other series that branch off from this. There's also a series that is based off of Norse gods and a series that is based off of Egyptian gods. So obviously he's one who likes older gods series. So if you have a kid that's into mythology, that one might be a good one. Again, bunch of books in the series, so if they love it, there's a lot of books that they can try out, and I also appreciate that there is representation in these books for all genders and all sexualities, which is nice. It's not like it's heavy-handed or overly sexualized, obviously, it's just representation for those characters, and accurate representation to, like, the stories about these gods as well. Another older series, this is Fablehaven. This is the first book in the Fablehaven series. There's a bunch of books in this series as well. This is a series about a brother and sister whose grandfather is the keeper to, like, the last bastion of fantasy creatures. So everybody thinks that fantasy creatures are extinct or don't exist. They do exist, they're just in this secret sort of space called Fablehaven, where they all live for now. Something gets released that shouldn't have been released, and the siblings have to go out and basically right that mistake and save the world in that case. This is another series that I have only read the first book in the series. I haven't read any other ones, but it was strong enough in the first book, and again, there's like 8 or 9 books in the series, so if they really love it, there's a bunch of books in the series, as well as other books that this author has come out with after that fact. Now I'm going to be talking about some newer books that I have read and enjoyed. Newer as in like within the last 5 years or so, whereas these other series were sort of coming out about the same time that Harry Potter was coming out. This is the Blackthorne Key by Kevin Sands. I read this back when I was the kids lead at the Barnes & Noble in Hadley, but I still recommend it to kids now in the store that I work in. This is great for kids that prefer more realistic fiction. It does still have a fantasy base. The protagonist of this one is an alchemist's apprentice. His master winds up dead, and he needs to figure out like who killed him and why other alchemy masters are showing up dead, and he's also trying to solve the last sort of big puzzle that his master left for him in order to understand this bigger conspiracy. I will say I've done a full review of this particular book on the channel, so if you want to see more in detail thoughts, you can look at that. And also that I usually recommend this one for the older kids that are reading, young readers, almost ready to go into YA, because there is a bit of interpersonal violence that has more concrete descriptions. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to like a 7-year-old. This one's probably more for like 9-year-olds and up, maybe even 12-year-olds and up. Just because of that, you know your kid better than I do, so I always give that little caveat. There is some violence in here that is a little bit graphic. Obviously not like crazy graphic, but it's there. There are consequences to the actions. I appreciate that. And also it's a little bit more historical, a little bit less fantasy. There's still that alchemy element, which isn't necessarily realistic, but it's like chemistry alchemy. It's not like magic alchemy in the same way. Another book that I have a full review of on the channel, this is The Box and the Dragonfly, the first book in the Keeper series by Ted Sanders. This is about kids who sort of stumble across this weird secret magical warehouse, and they become paired with a particular object, and depending on the object that they are paired with, they get a specific power. The protagonist of this one gets paired with a box, which allows him to put things inside and move it forward in time. One of his friends has a dragonfly necklace that when she wears it allows her to become invisible and sort of move through space and time in a weird way. So like she can like move through walls in a weird way because she's like able to use that vibrations of that butterfly necklace in order to do that. They get sucked in by having these items. A world where there are the makers of those items are these ancient beings, and they want to take those items back from humanity. They can't use the items though, so they do try and take any keeper, the people who have the items, and bring them over onto their side rather than the human side. This is also a newer series. There's a couple books in it right now. I don't know if it's still got books coming out or if it's stopping at the trilogy that we have released. But this one I really enjoyed, both a boy and a girl protagonist. Interesting world, interesting concept of these magical items, and hard magic where you have like they can only do this one specific thing. Each of them has this one specific power versus having like the ability to cast any spell that they want. My next pick also has a video dedicated to it on the channel, and that is The Screaming Staircase by Jonathan Stroud. Folks may recognize that author's name because he also wrote the Bartimaeus trilogy, which came out about the same time that Harry Potter came out. This is his newer series. It's about a group of kids who have the particular ability to see ghosts. Only children can see ghosts, but ghosts are a very tangible threat in the real world. They work in an agency in order to exorcise ghosts or get rid of ghosts or help protect people from ghosts, because the adults can't see it, the kids can, and as you age out you no longer have that ability to see the ghosts. This also follows a trio of friends who are working on solving a mystery. I appreciated this. The dynamics between the three friends felt very similar to the dynamics between the three friends in Harry Potter. It also takes place in England, so it has that aspect of it if your kid is interested in that. But again, this one's a little bit spookier, a little bit more threatening. Obviously the ghosts have the ability to harm people, including the kids themselves, so that's something that you might want to take into account. And there's some spooky imagery. Ghosts are spooky, you know, might be a good thing for spooky season, but also just if you have kids that like some spookier themes. I appreciated this one. I appreciated the tone and the friendship group in here as well. So, good one. One that I recommend a fair amount. The last one that I want to recommend is the one that is perhaps the most similar to Harry Potter in themes, but it is harder to get your hands on. It is an older series, and that's the Charlie Bone series. Midnight for Charlie Bone is the first book. This was coming out concurrently with Harry Potter. It is not one that I have seen in my kids section currently, so it may be something that you need to get older copies of, look for in used bookstores, or find elsewhere online. I don't know that it's still in print, but about a kid who goes to magic school, or rather a preparatory school that has a subsect for kids with magical abilities. There's kids with musical abilities, kids with artistic abilities, etc. that also go to the school who do not have any magic at all, but this subsection of them do have magic. I reread this one a couple years ago, and I really enjoyed it, and I think that it was overshadowed by Harry Potter. They were coming out at about the same time, and a lot of people really talked about this one as if it were a Harry Potter knockoff. I don't think it's trying to be Harry Potter, and that's actually kind of working in its detriment that it is so similar to Harry Potter. But if there is a kid who like really wants that magic school, prep school type place, and also the you're like sort of coming from this rich lineage that has this magic, that's something that shows up in here. There's representation in this one for albinos, which I found super interesting. That's not something I see a lot of, and disabilities that come with that, including issues seeing, and also issues fitting in. So that's an element of this that I, think is quality, worth reading about. And I appreciated this one for having more interesting antagonism within the family. Not that they themselves are antagonists like your Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, but that because they are, it's as if reading about Draco Malfoy, because you're reading about this kid who is in a family who's very uptight about the magic that they have and how very strict they are about the rules surrounding them, and sort of fighting against those social norms within his family. There are so many more great fantasy and science fiction series in the kids section that have come out since Harry Potter came out. Harry Potter really allowed for more books in this genre to come out, that we are now getting to see all of these really great stories aimed at children. There are plenty of places that you can go to look for more recommendations, including just browsing in section. There are so many series and so many good books that I couldn't mention all of them. These are just the ones that I personally have read and would recommend to kids, and do recommend to kids when given the opportunity at my job. If you have any recommendations for kids books that I should look into and read and see that have good representation in them, please leave them down below. I always love reading books with representation in them. There are plenty of other reviews on my channel here where I talk about kids books, YA books that have representation in them, because it's something that I care about, something that I want to see. I will say that that list was remarkably white. None of those series really had characters of color in them, so that is something that I need to either look for more readily, is more books about children of color. I feel like most of the kids books that I have read that have children of color in them are more traditional contemporary fiction or historical fiction. So maybe that's something that if you have read something, please give to me so that I can read more about it. I want to, but I'll give that as, some recommendations to do. Some recommendations to look into if you are so inclined. I hope that you got some good recommendations there from me, and I will talk to you again soon.